Hi, I'm Tommy Schnurmacher for the Chosen for What, a podcast by the Foundation for Genocide Education. Some survivors keep silent about the Holocaust. They want to shield their children from the horrors they've endured. Others choose the opposite. They want to speak openly. They want to speak often about what they experienced because they're determined to make sure that no one would ever forget. My guest today, Agneta Hollander, grew up in a home where the Holocaust was part of daily conversation. The daughter of two survivors, her mother deported to Auschwitz at 14 and her father imprisoned in camps for 4.5 years, Agneta carries forward their legacy through education and tradition. Originally from Romania, Agneta and her family later immigrated to Montreal, where she has since remained dedicated to preserving the memory of the Holocaust. She served as a guide or docent at the Montreal Holocaust Museum for more than 13 years and is an active member of the Foundation for Genocide Education. Today, she'll share how her parents' story shaped her life and why their message of not to hate remains so powerful and so relevant today. Agneta, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So, Agneta, tell me, what was it like growing up with parents who spoke about the Holocaust constantly? And when we say they spoke about it constantly, what were they talking about? What were they saying specifically?
Well, to start with, what it's really, I was born immediately after the war, obviously. My parents came back in 1945, both of them, different times, obviously. And they married in 1946, and I was born immediately after. So there it goes. What really marked our life is the fact that we had no grandparents. So that's how it started all. And I adopted absolutely every grandparent that ever existed around from anybody else. I called them my grandmother, whatever, Hungarian, because we come from the Hungarian part. So it was Hungarian and Romanian, Big Bobby, whatever you want. So that's how it started all. Till I finally, and mom, because mom lost all her family. She was really alone. Her two sisters immigrated very shortly to Israel. So she was, and my father, the only survivors with no family. So they talked about our grandparents first.
Yes, the grandparents, the whole issue of grandparents is so important. I remember when I was sent to a daycare once, and I had to call their lady there, grandma, when not your mama, when she wasn't, right? And that's how I first found out about the Holocaust. I asked my parents, how come I don't have grandparents? The other kids in the school have grandparents. Did you go through something similar?
Absolutely. And I called, we had my parents' friends, okay? So obviously, and everybody called her non-mama. So what do you think that I did? I called her non-mama. And I couldn't understand why we didn't have non-mama. So that's how it all started. Now, my mom talked about Auschwitz as a matter of fact, but basically what I understood much later in life, both my dad and my mom spoke about their experiences in function of their parents. They wanted us to know their parents. They wanted us to know our grandparents, even though they didn't exist.
They talked a lot about their parents.
Yes, absolutely.
So they talked a lot about their parents, but they didn't talk about Auschwitz itself, the details of what happened.
Absolutely. So it was combined, the two. It was combined in one, for example, mom, they arrived, it's part of the Hungarian transport. They arrived in May. Selection takes place. Mom and her two sisters are the only survivors, three. Mengele selected them. And my grandmother with her younger sister, went directly to the gas chambers. And my mom talked about nonstop till the day she died, that when she turned her head, her mom wasn't there anymore. So she asked somebody, where's my mother? Yiddish. My mother's mother tongue was Yiddish. So somebody very kindly pointed to the sky and said, Himmel,
Yeah.
Himmel. And the stacks were behind burning. And that's how my encounter with Auschwitz started. My grandmother is in Himmel, but with the
Wow.
staff there. Okay.
What my encounter, my mother was telling me about who went. They all went in the same time, the same
Right.
transports in May to Auschwitz, and my mother was with uh, she was going with her sister, and another sister went with her mother, and
Right.
the story they told me about as Mengele selected them, and then as she looked at her mother, and her mother looked back, and it was and it was the and it was the last and it was the last time that it was the last time that she saw her, and the fact that she had to deal with that and actually explain that to me, how it affected me, and I want to know what this did for you. How it affected me, how it affected me was that I wanted to fix the Holocaust at all costs, uh, to undo it. I wanted to protect my parents. Did you get a sense of that with your parents, Agneta?
Yes, I mean, our roles changed very, very quickly. Though, I mean, we have to recall that I was born, my mother was barely 18, right? With no parents, roles changed. I would say by the time I was a teenager, the roles changed. By the time came to Canada, I protected my parents all the time. I felt that it was our responsibility and duty to make their life better, to
Right.
ensure that they are missing nothing. And both my brother and I did that without even, I don't think that we were conscious of it. It was just natural to protect them. They were,
Right. Now, how did you feel that we felt it was natural to protect our
yeah,
parents? And the truth of the matter is, and yet between you and me, it isn't. Our job as
no,
children is to be children. Now, how
no,
did you feel it? How did you see yourself wanting to protect your parents as different from the kids who were not second gen, who felt their parents should be protecting them?
I never thought about it. I never thought about it. We grew up in a communist portion of Romania.
Right.
We left
Yeah.
64.
Same here.
So we knew a little bit of a very different type of anti-Semitism. So I grew up more with that portion of it. We are Jews, we are different. My parents suffered, both of them, but at the same time, I never, to be honest with you, I never gave it a thought that it was normal or not. It was the way
Mhm.
it was. Uh, I don't know if you experienced that, but for us, I mean, I traveled for work around the world, and it took me a while to figure out. Both mom and dad requested that I call as soon as I land. As soon as I land somewhere, I had to call. And being young, what do? I mean, you still rebel. I mean, you understand, but there's still a sense of rebellion in you. And I said, well, no, I'm old enough. No. And at one point, I did understand it. I don't know what happened. I can't tell you. It was one of those moments. The loss. They were afraid. The sense of loss,
Right. Yes.
humongous loss was there. But as a teenager, as a young adult growing up, you don't necessarily always put your finger on it, and that comes
Of
with
course, it takes a while in terms of not putting your finger on it all the time. I remember many years ago, I think it was in the 70s, somebody told me that there was something called a second generation group, and that and I said my comment. I remember what I said. I said, "So my mother was in Auschwitz, their mother was in Auschwitz. What could we possibly have in common?" I
no,
thought at the time, I was completely wrong, and of course, only decades later, you find out
later.
that you have a lot in common, quite a lot in common.
In the stories and the way we react. So after that aha moment, as soon as I landed, visited it, Japan or wherever, the first thing that I did, call home. That was it. My father and mother heard my voice.
Chosen for What is brought to you by the Foundation for Genocide Education. To learn more or to make a donation, head to gened.org. You'll find the link in the show notes. And now, back to the podcast.
In terms of how it's passed on to to the next generation. As my mother got older, I had to be reassured constantly that she was okay. And if I called and she didn't answer on the third ring, then the worst possible thing must have happened. If there was an ambulance parked outside, it must be for her. Like, like one time out of 100 it was, but 99 times for 100 it wasn't. So did you find yourself with a similar situation, worried about how are they doing?
Yes, absolutely. I think that that transfer occurred. And that's probably one of the legacies that
Yeah.
I think that Auschwitz left with us, with my brother and I. That it's and my brother does have a son, and it's my parents more or less who took care of him. He didn't go to daycare, and that was also transferred to him
So
because
he's also very worried. The sentence I said most often to my father in his entire life was, "Daddy, okay, Vaj? Daddy, okay, Vaj?" Like if I'd ask him and he'd say yes, that's okay, then I'd feel relieved. But 5 minutes later, now I don't know how he is. I have to ask him again because what about now? Is he okay now?
we continuously worried, and it's part, I think that is the way it impacted us,
Yeah,
notwithstanding that another part that impacted me, and I'll tell you a story. I don't know if it's appropriate. You'll decide later if it is. Since my mother spoke about Auschwitz and how Auschwitz was for them, for the three sisters and all the starvation and the rest and the selection, they were selected by Mengele 7 times, the three sisters. So I arrived in Berlin at a conference in 1992. The conference was in East, but I stayed on the other side. And as I arrived, usually when I arrive in the country, changes, the first thing that I do is get out because I work the next day. So I need to adjust and adapt as fastly as I
right.
can. So I walked out of the Intercontinental in Berlin, and and all of a sudden there was German shepherds and the police and the sound of the sirens. And I have to tell you that for a split of a second, I was in another world. And I lost it, and I started running. I went back to the hotel, and I called my father. At that time, my father was still alive. And I said, it's horrible. And my father is the one who says, "Calm down. This is 1992. This is not
Wow.
Germany." But to tell you to what extent the stories, I can sometimes feel that I can recount my parents' stories because I heard it so much that it feels like it's part of us.
It becomes part of our story. And the same thing happened. I was going to Italy and we were transferring in Zurich
Yeah.
and the airport. We're on a train, a beautiful modern train and comfortable and pleasant and delightful. We get on the train and they say something in English and French on the loudspeaker. It's lovely. Then they say something in German on the loudspeaker. And all of a sudden I'm like extremely tense and it just hits me. Train to Auschwitz, because then you think it through, like like your thoughts go back to what
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 it
you
was.
what you heard.
So if you ask how that's more or less at those levels, and the impacts, both mom and dad impacted us differently though, because the experiences were different. Daddy was in labor camps and it's basically labor camps
Yes,
in the part of, it was Hungary, Poland, Ukraine, and
I
that.
mean, yeah. My father was the same. They went through the same thing. For all we know, they could have passed each other
Well, I
there.
think that our mothers must have met in Auschwitz.
Yes,
Because I read your book that you wrote about your mom, and I
yeah.
think that there are numbers that are 5,000 apart. And being of the Hungarian transport, I have a sense that, I mean, they probably didn't know that I'm not telling you that they knew each other, but they were at the same time in Auschwitz, probably.
Yes. Did she know anyone who worked in the Canada section sorting through the goods?
My mother didn't, but my mother had a friend, which is Mira Kornhauser Gold. She was part of the 999 woman. That's
Yeah.
the Slovak team. And she worked in Canada.
Oh, so and my aunt worked in Canada, and actually, I later found out that Irma Greza, one of the
That's right.
Nazi
Right.
commandants, actually arranged. My mother asked about her parents. She said, "Your parents are gone. Your younger siblings are gone," and she found out about their sister was there at the camp working in Canada, and she allowed them to meet for 5 minutes.
You see, I mean, so
But I
it
mean, I knew these stories about Irma Greza when I was nine, like 9 years old, which is a heavy thing to deal with when you're a 9-year-old kid.
Mengele was difficult to deal with it. And the impact on my mom, doctors, she was frightened of them. She
She
was
was frightened of them.
well, she was selected 7 times by Mengele. I mean, it
Wow.
wasn't a great, and in Dachau, because she did go to Dachau too, they pulled a tooth for her. And she was telling that the pain was so horrible that she had to take a decision. Do I go or what do I do? So finally said, okay, whatever happens to me, it will happen. They didn't kill her. They pulled her tooth. But that fear of doctors stayed all along. I mean, she knew it wasn't conscious, it was subconscious. Because
Yes.
consciously she knew that they're not going, I mean, but subconsciously there was a fear that was there. She was young. I mean, the impact of a young child, and especially what they left, but the legacy that they both left is that we know our grandparents through their voices, um, through friends of my dad. I mean, that lived more or less in the same period in the same little shtetl village, which is outside Kolozsvár, outside Cluj. That's where we were born. They passed on the recipes that they say that my grandmother, because apparently my grandmother, paternal one, was a great cook and baker. She comes from Hungary. She comes from Debrecen. Okay, so
Hmm.
she married my grandfather in 1912. So she moved to Transylvania portion of Romania. So I have her recipes. If it's hers or not, who doesn't really matter, does
So
it?
how important, like that food, to have the recipes, because everything my mother cooked, when asked her where did you learn it from, she learned it from her mother. Do you have like an obsessive relationship with Hungarian? I think Hungarian food is better than all food. I
Well,
just
for Purim, I always bake my paternal grandmother's recipes. I have them. If it's really hers, it was given to me. It doesn't matter. Most people probably had this at that period of time, probably had the same recipes more or less. And I bake them every single Purim since I know myself. Um,
Mhm.
the food, Daddy was every time he ate something at a dinner table, it wasn't that he was criticizing mom. He wasn't. But he always said, I think that my mother made it a little bit different. He always went back to that reference, always did.
Yeah.
That was the point of, it wasn't that it wasn't good, but I think that my mother made it differently. So when it was when I started, I mean, I started baking and cooking at 9. So when I started, he was more like, mm-mm. He used to call me Agica. So he said, no, no. My mother added, I think that it was a little bit this way. So I adjusted according I mean,
I know. I got all kinds of opinions about food from my mother at a very early age in terms of what coffee is like. In other words, like coffee in her book was coffee with milk, and American coffee, which had water in it, she called it moshlik, which is like dishwater.
dishwasher.
Like, and it took me till I was in my 20s to figure out that no, this coffee's okay, and people can drink this coffee because, of course, you believe whatever your parents tell you at a very young age is very, very important to you. How important is that tradition of food for you, to baking the dishes that your grandmother once made?
It's
What
very
kind of
important.
impact does that have on
To
you?
me, it's very important because in a way, I keep her alive.
Yes.
And also I passed it on. I created around 300. One of these days, I wish I could put it into a coffee book type of thing, but I created around 340 slides in PowerPoint just to pass it on to the kids and to know. And the recipes are there, because in a way, that's how my parents kept their parents and family alive. If not,
Yeah.
they would be dead. So what we learned from it is that talking about them actually keeps them alive.
Right, to make sure they're not forgotten. I want to ask you, you've spent a considerable amount of time as a docent and guide
Still am.
at the Montreal
I still
Holocaust
am. I'm still at it.
Museum. So tell me about that experience. Why do you believe that being a docent, why is that important? And what are you hearing from the people you take on these tours? What do you hear from them? What kind of questions are they asking you?
Okay, I retired in 2011, and that was something that I always wanted. When I retired, I'll dedicate to that portion. So I started guiding. I passed the training, all that since 2011, and I'm still guiding. I'm still a docent at the Holocaust Museum. It changed. It's very different depending on the group, depending on multicultural ethnicity, the background, and depending on how, you said something before that what your parents impact you. If your father says so, it's right. Well, that's what I can tell you that most of the kids that have a perception and opinion, or the way they're framing Jews and the Holocaust and the Shoah, I like to call it the Shoah, is based a lot on what they were told or what they hear in the house. And I think that is one of the greatest challenges that we have also. How do you counter what my father told me? How do you counter that? I know it would be hard with me because it's what my father countered. So what I heard prior to 2023, post 2023 changes a lot with what is going on as a guide.
Now, our parents went through the Holocaust. Did you come out of Hungary in 56?
We are Romanian. We came out of Romania in 64 through Italy. So we had political asylum in Italy. So we came from
Right.
Italy to
So
Montreal.
it it was in terms of the political situation and what they worried about. My parents went through the obviously the Holocaust and the Hungarian Revolution, and escaping in the middle of the night. And when there was the election in Quebec, the referendum on November the 15th, 1976, my mother calls me and she says, "Do we have to pack?" And I told her, no, it's not like that. It's not like that. It's November 16th will be just like November 15th. Don't worry about it. Now, your parents emphasized not to hate, despite everything, despite all they had suffered. What kind of impact did that have on you, Agneta?
At the time that they were talking about it, I don't think that we gave it much thought. But later on in life, we were able to be more accepting. We were able to look around us at the diversity and not start with prejudice. We were open. And that allowed us different encounters. And especially I was fortunate to travel around the world a lot. So it allowed the openness to accept and welcome whatever is different than maybe our experiences. My parents, I mean, my mother, after Auschwitz, she went like a lot of the Hungarian transport. They were in the factory. There was a sublet, which is WMF. The factory at that time was changed from making cutlery and all the pots and pans into making airplanes. Well, guess what? The first time I went to Germany, Mom made sure to tell me, make sure you buy a pot where I worked. So it wasn't. So I do have pots, if you believe. I have WMF pots in the house. So it wasn't, we can't have a German knife, or no, on the contrary, it was more, I don't know what the right word is, not a memoir because it's not a memory, but it was something, I was there.
Right.
I was there. The same thing, Stuttgart and Felderfing, except one thing. Neither one wanted to go back. Mom never wanted to go back to Auschwitz. We gave her the opportunity. We wanted to
Yes.
take her.
Yes. Same thing.
That she didn't want to do.
Same thing.
She
She
didn't
told me
want
that. Yeah, my mother also no interest whatsoever in going
to go
back.
back. Mom passed away in 2019. In 2020, there was the
My
last.
mother also passed away in 2019. Talk about coincidences.
So in 2020, Mom was invited because she was liberated at the house outside. They did the
Mhm.
last reunion. So we had an invitation for her, and one of us was going to go with her, and she was reluctant to go. She says, I don't want to go.
Mhm.
That is not something that I want to do. But I think that nature took a different path. But that's one thing, they never wanted to go back to that portion. That wasn't important to them.
Yeah. Yes. They wanted to move forward,
Forward. Yeah.
not backward.
Yeah.
Agneta, thank you so much for sharing your family story, your powerful reflections with us. If you liked what you heard today, make sure to follow or subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and family so we can continue to spread the word for the Foundation for Genocide Education. I'm Tommy Schnurmacher. Until next time.